engineers. This is Mr. Hernandez, and I'm here with your next engineering lesson. This one's going to be a little bit more of an activity. So this video here is to give you guys a little bit more information about 3D printing before you guys move on to your actual assignment. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at some 3D printing examples. So some things that I myself have actually designed and printed on a 3D printer. That way you can see what 3D printing is really capable of. So let's go ahead and jump into this right now. So first, this is how 3D printing works. So we have a nozzle on the 3D printer, and it's going to move around, and it's going to be putting plastic down in layers. And the smaller the layers are, the higher the quality of the final print is going to be. But also it means that it's going to take a lot longer to print every layer. So sometimes you can get away with having a really big layer height like this is showing, and then you make really big layers, because you can see these all have the same number of layers. I know it's a little bit hard to see with how blurry this picture is, but these all have the same number of layers, and you can see how much bigger this last one is, just because every layer is much bigger. So if you don't need your part to be super smooth, you can print with very big layers and it'll print very quickly. So let's go ahead and take a look at some examples here of the final products. So this first one is one that I actually use every day. This is a desk organizer. So this brown part right here is custom designed to hold on to my calipers in case I need to measure something, to hold on to a couple of pens so that I always have something to write with. I usually have a pencil in here too, but I must have run out of lead for that one. And it also holds a notebook. That way this can sit on my desk and it's everything that I need to take notes or write something down, or if I want to design something, to measure those parts so I know exactly what size I'm going to make it. So this is the first example. And our second example, this is also something that I use to kind of stay organized. It's these wall mounts. So I've got one right here for my headphones that holds those up to the wall, and one that actually mounts the dock from a Nintendo Switch. That way it's there if I want it, but it's out of the way if I don't want it. And these are just held to the wall with command strips like you can see right here. And the last example, this one is more relevant to your assignment for this week. This is something that I printed because of the coronavirus. So this is just a little hook that connects the straps on a mask behind the back of your head. That way these straps aren't sitting on your ears in case you have to wear this for a very long time. I'm sure you guys have experienced this. If you have to wear a mask for a long time, it starts to dig into the back of your ears. Well, this solves that problem. So with what all of these have in common is that they're all made with 3D printing, and they're all good examples of what 3D printing is capable of. So let's go ahead and break that down here. Now, there isn't a quiz attached to this, but I still want you guys to write down what's on this slide, because it's going to really help you with your assignment. So what can 3D printing do? 3D printing is really good at making complicated plastic parts. So if we look back at these designs, we can see there's a lot of different shapes, different hooks. This one has some very weird curves, and there's a little beam coming out here. And this one has this little cutout right here. It has these holes that are perfectly sized for different objects. And it even has a little shelf at a weird angle in the front. All of that would be kind of hard to make if you had to use traditional tools. So they're good at making complicated plastic parts. It's also good for making personalized parts or customized parts. So if you have something where maybe one person wants, let's go to this example, maybe one person wants it with an extra hook. That way, they can share it between a wife and a husband, and they have very different sizes here. Or maybe somebody wants theirs to have their name on it. 3D printing is really good for that because it makes every part one at a time. It's also, for that reason, really good at making new designs. So if a brand new problem comes up or you suddenly have an idea, 3D printing is really good for making that. Because again, it makes the parts one at a time, layer by layer. And the last example is that if you're willing to put in some extra work, 3D printing can also be food safe, which means that you can use it, you can use those 3D printed parts around food or to hold food like a plate or a bowl. And it can also make things that are waterproof, but that requires some extra work because 3D printing is layer by layer. So if you just use that for food right away, things like little bits of food can get stuck between the layers and water can get through them. So you do have to do more work to sand them and paint the outsides to make them food safe and waterproof, but it is possible. So this is what 3D printing is good at. Go ahead and pause here if you need to write down these bullet points, and then we'll move on to what 3D printing is not so great at. And this page just about sums it up. So we've got a couple of different examples here from different types of manufacturing. So over here, there is a huge plastic tank being made all in one piece. I'm guessing that's like a water tank or some other like container. Down here, we've got a part that's being molded out of plastic very, very quickly. I'm not quite sure what this would be used for, but you can see it is being made almost instantly. And then in here, we have a pizza sitting on a rack in an oven. And I'll explain how that's an example of 3D or how that's related to 3D printing in just a moment. So let's go ahead and look at what 3D printing isn't so great at making. Okay, so 3D printing is not great at making very large pieces because not only would it take a very long time to make something the size of that tank on the last slide, layer by layer, you'd also need a gigantic 3D printer for it. That's going to take up a lot of space and be very complicated to build. So 3D printing is not great for making very large pieces. It's also not great at making things very quickly. If you don't need to customize something, if you don't need to have different variations, or you know that you're just going to need to make 1,000 of one piece, there are better options than 3D printing, as we saw on the previous slide with the plastic that was kind of getting sucked down into the mold. It's also not great for making things that need to survive extreme temperatures. Depending on the material that you pick, some 3D printed parts will actually melt if you leave them inside a car on a hot day. I'm sure you guys know that it can get very hot inside a car if you leave the windows open and you park in the sun. Some 3D printed parts will melt even at that temperature. Now, you can pick different materials, different types of plastic that'll survive higher temperatures, but none of them are going to survive in a pizza oven. And last, 3D printing can't be used easily to make edible things. So if it's something that you need to actually eat or anything of that nature that actually like goes inside your body, like a medical device, 3D printing is not great for that. Because again, with work, we can make things food safe. We can seal up those ridges and the gaps between the layers, but we can't make it totally perfect. So for all of these options listed here, there are ways to do them with 3D printing, but they're not easy at all. So you could make a gigantic 3D printer and print out a whole house, but that's extremely difficult, and there's only maybe a couple of those machines in the whole world. You could also use a very large 3D printer to print a lot of things very quickly. I'm not saying that's impossible, but there are better options. And last, as far as edible parts and high temperatures, there are very specialized 3D printers that can print in metal or that can print with food. But the ones that print with food are usually custom, so somebody built them themselves. And the ones that print metal cost millions and millions of dollars. So it's not easy, even though it's possible. So keep this in mind as you guys go into your next into your next assignment, because it's going to be all about trying to use 3D printing to solve problems. Alright, so that's it for this presentation. Now let's go ahead and take a look at your actual assignment. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and look at your actual assignment for this week. So for your assignment this week, you have a document attached to this called 3D Printing and the Coronavirus. And it's going to take you to this document here. So when you open this up, I want you to first fill in the top. So write down your name here in this box and your class period here, whichever class period you happen to be in, for Miss Aransasu's science class. And for this, I want you to brainstorm, if you remember that from the engineering design process. So come up with as many ideas as you can for ways to use 3D printing to solve problems caused by the coronavirus. Now, by problems caused by the coronavirus, I mean both things that we're doing to stop coronavirus, so wearing masks all the time, social distancing, but also the other problems that are caused by all of the social distancing. So if you have a problem that is being caused by staying home and learning from home, and you have a solution to that that 3D printing can solve, then go ahead. That's a good example. So maybe it'll help here to take a look at one example that I can give you. So first, the problem. The problem is wearing a face mask all the time starts to hurt your ears. And the solution to that is the ear savers that I showed you in the presentation. So I have a name for the solution here, and then I have a description. So plastic hooks that connect the loops on the mask behind your head. They can be custom sized, which remember is something that 3D printing does really, really well, custom sizes. And I have a picture of this available because it's something that I actually made. If you don't, that's totally okay. Since this is brainstorming, I highly encourage you to maybe Google items that have been made with 3D printing. If you can't think of problems, maybe ask your parents, ask your siblings. You can even Google that, what problems have been caused by the coronavirus. And like I said, problems that are caused by social distancing or by distance learning are also fair game here. So if it's not directly connected to coronavirus, but it's caused by the fact that you have to take classes online or that you have to stay home all day, you can also use that as an example. Now, there are a lot of spaces here. I want you guys to come up with at least 5 problems that you have a solution to. Some things aren't really possible to solve with 3D printing. I do want you guys to keep in mind all those limitations that we talked about. But if you list something here that's not completely perfect, remember this is the brainstorming stage. So list as many ideas as you can here, even if it seems like it's a little bit of a stretch. Come up with more than there are spaces here. You can always add more. If you just press tab in the last box, it'll add a new one. So there's no maximum amount here. Just go ahead and spend the whole week thinking about this. Turn this in on Friday. I'm really looking forward to seeing what ideas you guys come up with.